The following clip is from the North to South Show, live every Monday and Wednesday at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, where we talk SEC football everything. Now, we'd love to have you out for next show, but for now, hit that like button down below, hit that subscribe button, and enjoy this clip. We're going to talk about what first-year head coach in the SEC I think is going to have the most success going in and coming out of this 2021 college football season. Now, define success. I could go out and I could pull up the Webster's Dictionary, Oxford Dictionary, whatever you want to do it, and say, oh, success is blah, 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 blah. But to be honest, there is multiple different ways that we could determine success in this scenario. We could look at it wins and loss wise, and I think if we just look wins and loss wise, if we're looking at these four teams, we're looking at Clark Lee and Vanderbilt, we're looking at Shane Beamer at South Carolina, we're looking at Josh Heupel at Tennessee, and we're looking at Bryan Harsin at Auburn. What team do I think will have the best record this year out of those four teams? As much as I hate to say it, because you can see I got the Gamecock Block C logo on my shirt, and I got a Gamecocks nice garnet and black jersey behind me. I want to say South Carolina because I'm a fan, but if I had to put money on it, which team I think would come out of those four teams with the best record this season, I'd say Auburn. Now, does that mean that I think Auburn and Bryan Harsin will have the most successful season out of every single first-year head coach? No, it depends on where your program is at and the strides taken to make your program more successful. So that's what I want to kind of get into today. I'm going to more focus on Bryan Harsin, Josh Heupel, and Shane Beamer. Clark Lee at Vanderbilt, I mean, all in all, I think if they get one SEC win this season, in all honesty, he might have had the most successful first year of head coaching in all of the SEC for all of these four guys. Like, Vanderbilt is just in that spot. They lose all the games last year. They don't win one game, where if they go out and they're able, maybe not even an SEC win, when they play Stanford this year or something like that, if Vanderbilt's able to knock off even like Missouri or Kentucky or Tennessee or South Carolina or something like that, or Ole Miss, I'd be shocked, and I think that is a huge improvement for what what Vanderbilt's at right now. So, talk about Vanderbilt, again, I said I'm going to kind of focus more on the other three guys just because Vanderbilt's program is in just such a different spot in terms of the talent on the team, in terms of the national media covering them and everything. So that's why I kind of want to focus more on Auburn, Tennessee, and South Carolina. So what should we start off with? Let's start off with Auburn. I think Auburn has a talented team. I think Auburn has a good team this year. Now, they do come in this season with, many would argue, the toughest schedule in all the SEC, and every single one of these teams is going to have one of the toughest schedules in the nation because you play an SEC slate each and every single season. Now, on top of playing the full SEC West gauntlet and playing Georgia out of the East and South Carolina out of the East, Auburn also goes out to Happy Valley this season to take on the Penn State and Nittany Lions, which will be a hard game going out there, especially if they decide that to be the whiteout game. So Bryan Harsin, setting up for his first year, obviously just got the big commit in TJ Finley. Still don't know who the quarterback's going to be. I still put my money on Bo Nix up until that Penn State game. After that Penn State game, I said I got TJ Finley starting the rest of the way out. But I think Auburn has some good building blocks around them. I think that they definitely have one of the more talented running back rooms in all the SEC this season. You look at Shivers, and then you obviously look at Tank Bigsby. I think the wide receiver core could use some work, but you got some talented guys out there. I look at Kenyon, and I look at a guy to break out this season, Xavier Capers, over there in the receiving game. And I think this Auburn defense is highly underrated, and they could go ahead and shock some people this year. I think especially in the secondary, I think they got a lot of talent in there, especially one of my favorite players in all the SEC, not just because of his name, even though his name is sick, Smoke Monday. I think he is a very, very talented player in this Auburn secondary, and I think that they have the building blocks around them to at least put up like a 7-win season this season. Like, looking at the records that I think the other teams will put up, I think if Auburn gets to 7 wins, I think record-wise they will have the best record of those four teams that I'm going to talk about today. I think you have some wins on the board. You have the Alabama State game on the board for you. You're going to have the Georgia State game on the board for you. You're going to have the Akron game on the board for you. You're going to have some SEC games. I think Mississippi State should be a win. I think Arkansas is one of those toss-up games. I think LSU could be a toss-up game. Depends on how LSU comes into this season. Now, let's keep in mind that you do travel to Tiger Stadium for that game. Ole Miss comes home, even though I feel like Ole Miss is a really good team this year. They do have to play in Jordan-Hare. You go to Kyle Field, which will be a bit tougher, and you get Alabama at home, and you play in South Carolina. And then obviously you also have Georgia at home as well. I think that this team is definitely capable of taking home 7 wins. Now, record-wise, do I think that 7 wins means that Bryan Harsin will have the most successful start to his tenure at Auburn, more than Josh Heupel at Tennessee, more successful than Shane Beamer at South Carolina, just because he got 7 wins? No, I do not, because that doesn't measure success. Success is how Auburn fans will come out of this season feeling about the future of Auburn football. Let's say you get your 7 wins against Akron, Alabama State. Let's say you go on the road and beat Penn State, you beat Georgia State, you beat Arkansas, Mississippi State, and then South Carolina. But then in the rest of your games, you get run out of town by like LSU, you get run out of town by Georgia, you get run out of town by Texas A&M and Alabama and all those teams. Even though they did beat Penn State on the road, does it really mean anything if this offense still isn't able to go out and score on the road? Let's say that Auburn's defense has a terrific defensive showing in Happy Valley and Penn State, and they're able to win the turnover battle, and they win that game solely one-score game off of their defense. If your offense isn't able to produce in the LSU game, in the Texas A&M game, in the Alabama game, in games like that against Georgia, against Ole Miss, are you really going to be coming out of that game, that season as an Auburn fan feeling as good or feeling more hopeful than you were going into last season that this Auburn team is going in the right direction? Again, it's just a question. I don't know. Maybe you might be, because you might be like, well, this defense is legit, and if our defense can keep winning us ball games, I think this Auburn team could still be successful. So something that I'm going to look for in Bryan Harsin's first season is offensive consistency and consistency at the quarterback position. If he could find his guy and just get him in a situation where you don't have one side of Bo Nix showing up every week and then the other side showing up the next week, where it's stuff like that. If you can find your consistent guy, whether that be Bo Nix or TJ Finley, and put him in a system that allows him to be consistent week in and week out, I think that will be major improvement, not only for just that quarterback in general, but showing the Auburn fans that whoever comes in at Auburn at QB, we will tailor to his style, and we will go out and make sure that he can play consistent, because I think consistency is something that Auburn fans have really been struggling with, because Bo Nix has had some amazing games, but there's been other games that have been terrible for Bo Nix. So it's 50-50. If he can find consistency on this offense, especially at the quarterback position, I think Bryan Harsin will be titled as having a very successful season, and Auburn fans will be very happy about that. Now let's talk about Tennessee. Tennessee's a confusing team to me because, yes, they just lost a bunch of transfers and everything like that. They've had NCAA problems the last year or so and all that kind of stuff. What do I think that Josh Heupel needs to come into this program and do to make them quote-unquote successful? I think, again, just the same as Auburn. I think that you could say this about all the teams. Consistency at the quarterback position. I think South Carolina has a good guy at the quarterback position, and it's not like I'm calling out for Luke Doty's head saying he's really good one game and he's totally inconsistent the next game. I think that this is really true for Tennessee. Tennessee's got 4 really good guys that they could throw in that quarterback and still have somewhat successful of a season. Now, I think that there are some guys who bring you more success rather than others, and that's just my opinion. But you look at the guys, Hendon Hooker, you look at Brian Maurer, you look at Harrison Bailey, and then you look at Joe Milton coming out of Michigan. I really liked Harrison Bailey at a spring ball. I think Hendon Hooker also looked really good in spring ball. And then Joe Milton, we haven't even seen yet. And he had some high hopes at Michigan, so he could do something really good there. I think Tennessee just wants to get back to competitiveness and competing for the SEC East. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen this year. I'm not saying that Tennessee is going to go out, upset Georgia, upset Florida, and all of a sudden Tennessee's going to go out and win the SEC East. What I'm saying is they did have competitive games against Florida and against Georgia last season. If you can keep playing competitive against those two teams, make competitive games out of Alabama, which has been a struggle the last couple seasons because Alabama's been a really good team and Tennessee just hasn't been able to match that. I'm not saying that it has to be a competitive game throughout, but I think Tennessee fans would really like, let's say for the first 2 quarters, it's only a 1-score game and Tennessee's one touchdown away, just one fumble, one interception, one mistake by Alabama away from tying this game up going into halftime. Just something like that to show, okay, we can still hang with the big boys because Tennessee's going to draw on talent no matter what. Is it going to be at Alabama's level each and every single season? I don't know. That depends how Tennessee does in the recruiting game for the next couple of years. But no matter what, Tennessee's always going to have some type of talent in that locker room. It's just, how do you use it? How do you coach them up? How competitive are you able to be in these games? So I think that that's something that would make Josh Heupel really successful this season, is just getting back to competitiveness and beating teams that you're supposed to beat, because Tennessee had some losses last year, losing to teams that they should not have lost to. When you go back, let's say 2 years ago, if you would have told Tennessee fans that they would have lost to that team, you would have thought that they were crazy. So I think Tennessee needs to get back to competitiveness and just winning the games that they're supposed to win. South Carolina, now here's the interesting one, because this is obviously my favorite team, and I am as high as the moon. If you've been watching all my videos that I've done about the South Carolina Gamecocks on this show, you would know I'm very, very high on Shane Beamer. What does success look like for the Gamecocks? And I think it's kind of the same thing as Tennessee, where I just want to see competitiveness. The last couple seasons, you look at our games against Clemson and you look at our games against Texas A&M, we have been beaten like a rented mule each and every time we go and play those teams the last couple seasons. I'm not saying we have to beat them. I'm not saying this team could win 3 games all year. Like, you could win 4 games all year. You could win East Carolina, you could win Troy, you could win Eastern Illinois, and you could win Vanderbilt. I think that those are your 4 wins on the tables. You could lose Kentucky, you could lose Missouri, you could lose Tennessee, you could lose Florida, you could lose Georgia, you could lose Auburn, you could lose Clemson, and you could lose Texas A&M. And as long as we are competitive in those games, I feel like success and strides have been made in this South Carolina program. Because you look back 2 years ago, last season, we only won 2 games. You look back 2 years ago, we only won 4 games. What season was that? 2015, we only won 3 games. 2016, Will Muschamp goes out. Yes, he does make a bowl game his first season, wins 6 games. But does a bowl game really, really measure the success of this team? Does a bowl game really send the message to the rest of the SEC that South Carolina is trending towards the brighter future and South Carolina is trending up? Would you rather get run out of town against Georgia or play a competitive game against them and lose by, let's say, 7 points or a 1-score game, or let's say even 10 points, something like that, but the game is competitive throughout, and not make a bowl game, or make a bowl game and get run out of town against all those teams? I just want to see competitiveness. I want to see some more consistency in the secondary, definitely. I know the secondary is a bit beat up this year. We're weaker. It was a weak spot when it was supposed to be a strength for our team last year. And if you look on paper, you look at the guys that we had in our secondary, it should have definitely been a strength of our team. We just didn't put those guys in positions to have good games and everything like that. So that's what I'm going to look for. I'm going to look offensively. If we could score 30-plus points each and every game, I'm not saying against like your good teams, but like if we could go up against a team like Kentucky or Tennessee or your Missouris or something like that, I'd want to score 30 or more points. We're in a new age of college football where it is necessary that you have to be in that 30-plus range against teams like that, and you're not able to go up against your guys like Georgia and Florida and whoever Texas A&M and Clemson if you cannot score 30-plus points against those other teams. So I think offensive consistency is definitely going to be there. I want to see more consistency in the secondary and just play competitive games. Just play competitive games against your Texas A&Ms, your Clemsons, your Georgias. I'm not saying that we never played a competitive game against Georgia because obviously we beat them just 2 years ago, but Texas A&M and Clemson has been a real struggle. So if I would have to say which guy is better set up for a successful season this year, I think all of them are. I think all of them are in a good spot no matter how you see it. I think all of them are in a good spot to have a better season than the team did last year in terms of not a record-wise, but just looking at the trajectory of the program and which way it's going and the culture built around that and everything, because South Carolina's has already got better. I can tell you that. The last couple months, South Carolina's culture and everything in that locker room, I've already seen huge improvements there. I'm not sure about Auburn. I'm not sure about Tennessee, but all these guys are set up to have a successful season this season in terms of improvements and everything like that. Which guy would I bet probably has the best chance to look the most successful at the end of the season? I'm going to say Auburn probably. I think that Bryan Harsin and Auburn have the talent to do something special in the SEC West, and that's not saying that they're going to contend for the West champion. They're not going to go up against Alabama and Texas A&M and knock both of them down. But I think you could see them getting in that third spot. I think that you have a chance to have a big road win against Penn State, and especially if they go out and win that Penn State road game, I think people are going to think really, really highly of Bryan Harsin and what Auburn is doing for the next couple seasons. But all in all, what I'm trying to say in this is Josh Heupel, Shane Beamer, and Bryan Harsin, I think will all make major improvements for their programs after next season.